Well, I have in the studio the head of research at Afri Invest West Africa, Robert Omotunde. He joins me live. Robert, it's really good to have you to discuss this. First, I'm looking at this increase of 9.75% from what we did in, that's 2019, from 8.9 trillion, we're looking at 9.75 trillion. How did that really come to you?
Well, again, it speaks to what has been consistent. I mean, since the new government came in 2015, we've had incremental budgeting, you know. I mean, before, what we've had has also always been incremental budgeting. But I mean, when the government came in 2015, you know, there was a talk about zero-based budgeting. Yeah. But they soon found out that that was not going to help, especially given the critical challenges that we're facing right now. So what we are seeing now is almost somewhat consistent with the increase that we saw between 2018 and 2019, you know, and then moving from 2019 now to 2020, you know. I mean, it's still in line with so many plans of government as regarding infrastructure. But the big elephant in the room is still the recurrent component of our budget. We need to do something about it. Of course,
it's on the high side. I hear overheads. I hear running costs going on the high side. Yep. We're still running kind of expensive way of governance and even ministries, departments, and agencies of government.
Absolutely, because again, when you look at the performance of the budget vis-a-vis, you know, again, we are doing a comparison of budget to budget. You know, we're not really looking at what is the actual, you know. There is no year that you would not find almost 100% of the recurrent component of our budget being expended. But what happens to the capital component? That's what suffers, you know, especially now that the government is struggling in terms of its own revenue sources. You know, I mean, you've seen all sort of plans that the government is trying to put in place to improve its revenue profile, because for you to continually have an incremental budget, then the revenue of government has got to improve. If that is not happening, then what you continue to see, as we have seen historically, even up until 2019 budget, which is currently running, has been the financing of budget through what economists call ways and means. It's simply an overdraft by the central bank to the government. I mean, this is definitely not going to help us going forward, you know. So there was an increase in minimum wage, okay, to 30,000. Government has to make provision for the payment of the minimum wage.
To avoid the solidarity fight.
Again, so I mean, it's a genuine concern for workers that, so when you work, the wage you earn should be a living wage. You know, it's a wage that should be able to solve most of your issues. You know, we know that even at 30,000 naira, most of the workers may not even be able to, you know, use the 30,000 naira to feed for those who are at the minimum level of the cadre. You know, so that's not to say that we should not have increased the minimum wage. But the issue is we need to look at much more, you know, and again, when we talk about affecting the lives of the people, it's not just from the federal government level. You know, it speaks to what happens at the state government level. And it's unfortunate that each time we talk about the budget, you know, MTEF definitely is a federal document. We seem to look away from what's going on at the state government and at the local government. And these are critical areas of, you know, growth. If we actually want to drive growth within this economy, we need to be scrutinizing the budget of states and the budgets of local government and get the states much more importantly to be viable. Because if we do not have viable states, you know, they can't generate revenue. They will keep depending on the federal government for all of the, you know, different sources of revenue. And you see governments, even federal government, struggling, you know, which is why you know, the latest has been the increase in VAT. Yeah, from 5% to 7.2%. Yeah, and when you look at it, you know, really, that's not to say that Nigeria is not one of the countries where we pay the least of VAT, especially even within Africa. But the issue has been that for the ones that are potentially qualified to be collected, I mean, look at consumption expenditure component of our GDP. It's about 73%. If you apply 5% VAT on that, what you should be getting, it's something in the neighborhood of 4.5 trillion. But in 2018, VAT collection was only 1.1 trillion. What has happened to the 3.4 trillion potential VAT that should have been collected, even at 5% rates? You know, so again, we're talking about increase. And who suffers? Those who are in Lagos, Abuja, Kano, Kaduna, and Rivers State, because they generate 87% of the total VAT that we pay. In Lagos already, we pay consumption tax of 5%, we pay VAT of, now going to 7.2%, that will be 12.2%. Meanwhile, this same revenue will be collected and will be shared by the 36 states. We need to move away from this, and that's when our budgeting will begin to make sense.
Now, let's look at the key assumptions here. We see oil production capacity at 2.18 million. Crude oil price, well, that seems to be moderate to me. That was the first thing I saw, and I said this seems to be moderate. $55 per barrel seems to look very good, as against $60 for 2019, and also 305 naira for exchange. What do you make of this?
So let's look at it from the perspective of the budget benchmark. I mean, for oil, I agree with you that it's a very conservative estimate at $55 per barrel, because the global oil dynamics in terms of demand and supply, they're not looking good for now, especially looking into 2020. We might begin to have a situation where we might even have below $55 per barrel, of oil. Perhaps we should prepare for between $45 to $50 in 2020. That's one line. But again, in the revenue profile of government, as we have seen consistently over the last 3 years, oil revenue relative to what government projects is taking smaller and smaller share, because again, we are seeing sources, independent sources of revenue, which is made up of surpluses from NDAs. We are seeing increased revenue generation through taxes, which is a good move. We are seeing recoveries, from looted funds and all other sources, and we keep seeing these exchange rate gains. Again, one of the assumptions is that exchange rate will be at 305. And I do not understand why we keep making our budget on the assumptions that are not realistic. 305 is not an exchange rate in Nigeria. The exchange rate is the market rate, which is the rate at which you get at the I&E FX window, the NAFEX rate. On the average, 360 to 365. It's consistent with what we have at the parallel market. Now, when we appreciate and accept the true value of the exchange rate, it gives more money to the states who are struggling. That's not to say that they shouldn't be much more fiscally responsible. Exactly. But again, it is an assumption that we have carried for way too long, when the market reality does not suggest that anybody gets exchange rate at 305. Come on. We should align with the market, which is what, the central bank is managing. 305 is only the CBN's rate that if you analyze the market participants, perhaps less than 10 to 20% of participants get that rate. So why can't we align with what the majority gets? 360, 365. He puts more money in the pockets of government, and we can run our budget much realistic.
Let's look at debt servicing now. This is projected to increase, obviously. I think 2.14 trillion in 2019 to about 2.45.
Again, reality suggests that we will actually have more than that, because again, we are comparing budgets to budgets. Based on the actual number released by the government, in this same MTEF document, debt service by our estimate is around closer to 60%. I think it's around 58 to 59%. That's debt service to revenue ratio. This has been high consistently over the past few years, which is why the government is driving to ensure that more revenues, are being collected. But the point here is that for how long are we going to continue to have that high debt service to revenue? And you must sympathize with government, really. Indeed. Because again, there are so many issues to be addressed. Weak growth momentum that we need to, further recapitalize, which is why we're saying the government is pushing too much body on itself, by trying to say, oh, we have most people that are poor in Nigeria. So government's way of solving, the poverty issues in Nigeria is to give more social intervention, give subsidy on petroleum, give subsidy on tariffs on electricity, and give so many other subsidies that are preventing investment from coming into Nigeria. Government wants to create 100 million jobs over the next, I don't know whether it's next 10 years.
10 years.
How do you create 100 million jobs without the private sector? It's absolutely impossible. How many jobs can the government create? Nigeria is not an exception Government cannot create 100 million jobs. You know,
I agree with
that's certain. So what do we need to create these 100 million jobs? But we can create far more than 100 million jobs if we allow the private sector to drive this economy. Why are we afraid from a market economy?
What's always this issue of not allowing the private sector play this role? We get
so let me give you a simple one. You know, there are so many infrastructure issues that we have.
Yeah.
But one has been tied to almost every infrastructure problem we have in Nigeria. That is power. What we need to solve the power problem after the privatization that was not, you know, properly done in 2013 is to ensure that there is a market reflective tariff. If you analyze your, I mean, technically we call it the LCOE, levelized cost of electricity. If you analyze your LCOE from the power you generate from your inverter, from your generator using diesel and the grid, you're paying well over 50 naira to 70 naira per kilowatt.
Yes.
But the regulatory tariff is 23, 22, depending on where you stay. No investment will come into that sector on that basis. You understand? So it is true. And when you talk about consumption, most times government tries to protect the poor, but they end up protecting the rich. Look at petroleum subsidy that we mentioned. If you take out subsidy, who do you think will suffer? You know, it is so-called, nobody, I mean, the rich people the poor people you're trying to protect, they don't consume as much fuel. Even electricity generation. If you use high-powered equipment in your homes, you tend to consume more power, more energy, right? So, but most of the poor who are living below $1, 2 cents per day, they don't have air conditioners in their room. You know, some of them don't even have televisions. They just need one bulb and one fan. And that won't consume as much, even at $70 per kilowatt. They may still be able to survive that. But what about the jobs that you have created? If more investments come into that, when you create those jobs, you are reducing unemployment. More income comes into the country. Government can charge more taxes. It's a whole lot of benefits that come to government.
Robert, I see this issue of willing buyer, willing seller, which is also coming up in the power sector.
Absolutely.
Because we know some major markets in the country now that run solar, you know, and it's very effective, and they are ready to pay. They have clean energy. It's regular. Their businesses are getting better according to them. How well can we?
That's a positive of the last power minister, we had. And I hope that this government can, the new minister
can take a cue from that.
Yes. Because really, the willing buyer is happening in Lagos. It's happening in Lagos, very close to us in this studio.
Yes,
where people who are willing to pay as high as the distribution company is willing to charge. They get consistent power. That is an example of what a market economy would do for power problem in Nigeria. The barber you are trying to protect prefers to pay a higher tariff when connected to the grid than to be burning those fuel on the generator. And I mean, it's not rocket science. These things are simple, yet it looks complex when it comes to Nigeria.
Let's round this up this way now. We need to move on as a country. And looking at all of this, or at least the tribunal yesterday, and we need to settle for governance. What are your expectations? Now we've been greeted with this VAT. I think that's for 2020, and a lot more might come up because government must, one way or the other, show up revenue.
The president told us to prepare for tougher times. I don't have issues with increasing taxes, but I'm saying there must be efficiency, right? And part of the efficiency is to ensure that the potential taxes that should be collected, let's not be lazy even as a government. The potential taxes, and I just made an example of the VAT. We're not collecting all the potential taxes that need to be collected within the system. As much as we struggle with our income lines, government can still earn much more revenue if more people are gotten into the bracket. But let's leave that by the side. The expectation is so many people are hopeful. Some people say, when you look at the facts, there are no basis to be hopeful. But it's better to be hopeful.
That's everybody's way to Canada.
Yeah, so it's better to be hopeful. But government must take some critical steps to sort of rekindle people's hope in the ability of this country to thrive, as a nation, especially when you compare us with people, of similar sizes and shapes and forms. Now, one of the issues that we believe that the government needs to address is to put policies in place that are clear-cut, that people can really know that, oh, this is the direction of government, But much more importantly, we need to open up our economy, We need to open it up and get it more competitive. By July of 2020, if after plans are in place, you may start losing our brothers to neighboring countries where the jobs are likely going to spring up. Because in terms of competitiveness for starting a business and running it, we may not be as competitive. So the foreign direct investment may actually go to Ghana, South Africa, and those other countries. And because there is AFTA in place, products or produce from those countries can easily come into Nigeria. Does that not mean we're going to kill more, industries that we have? But we can change the tide if we become more competitive. Power is the way to start. It's a quick win.
Thank you very much, Motunde Roberts. It's always nice having you on the show. Head Research, AfriInvest West Africa. Thank you very much for spending your afternoon with us.
Thank you.
Looking critically at this very important